worked as a cocktail waitress when I was 22. My shift was from 5 p.m. until 2 a.m. As a waitress, I'd become used to being harassed. Usually, it wasn't anything too over the top or frightening. Most customers were regulars who flirted innocently. Just good-natured banter. Nothing threatening or in any way sinister. Up until this night, I never felt a sense of danger from any of the customers I'd waited on. On this particular night, though, everything changed. I was being harassed by a creepy customer I'd never seen before. He'd said such inappropriate things to me that creeped me out. He was relentless with his inappropriate remarks. At one point, as I was serving him his drink, he reached out and put his hand on my ass. After this happened, I never went back to his table again. If he wanted another drink, he'd have to go up to the bar and ask the bartender. I was through with waiting on this sinister creep. This happened back in 1978, so it was a time when I didn't have any recourse when things like this happened. The bartender only made customers leave when they were far too drunk to sit on a bar stool or at a table or booth. Otherwise, we were on our own to deal with creepy customers. At closing, he finally left. Even though he was gone, I still felt such a sense of unease. I wasn't easily spooked, but this guy had really freaked me out. There was just something off about him. It took me nearly an hour after closing to complete the work and cleaning I had to do, to have the bar ready for the following day. So it was about 3 a.m. as I made my way through the dark parking lot to get to my car. It was such a deserted and isolated place at night. The parking lot had woods that surrounded it. That, in and of itself, was creepy. But as I was about halfway to my car, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. My heart began to pound as I realized that he had waited in the lot for me to come out. I knew I had to get to the safety of my car, or this man was going to do God knows what to me. I was young and fit, whereas this man was in his late 40s and overweight. My thoughts were quickly assessing my situation. I didn't want to be kidnapped and murdered. That was the scenario I envisioned if this man got to me before I could get to my car. I knew I'd have to make a run for it. I ran as fast as possible, jumped inside the car and locked the door. It wasn't a moment too soon because this man was now at my driver's side window, demanding me to roll it down. He kept yelling that he didn't want to hurt me, that he only wanted to talk. He began to pound on the window as I fumbled with my keys to try to get the hell out of there. I began to fear that he'd shatter my window and get his hands on me. Finally, I got my car started, and as I put the car into reverse and backed out, he began to scream bloody murder. He was yelling for me to stop because I'd run over his foot. My gut instinct told me that this man was faking the injury to get me out of the car. I was not going to get out of that car for any reason. I drove home as fast as I could. Once home, I called the police. I came to take my report and get my description of the guy. At this point, I wasn't certain about whether I had injured him or not. I explained all of this to the police officer. The police sent another officer to the parking lot to see if he was still there and suffering from an injury. He wasn't there. Nobody called the police to report a hit and run either. The police told me that I'd done the right thing by not falling for his ruse. I called my boss the following day to tell him that I wouldn't be returning to work. I'd never been so frightened by anyone before. It was a night in which I truly feared for my life. There was no way I could make myself return to the job. The night still haunts my dreams. This happened a couple of months ago. I was driving home from work at 2 a.m. I'm a nurse and I live in a small city. The roads were totally deserted and it was a freezing night. I don't live far from work, maybe a couple of miles. I'm driving down a residential street around the corner from my house and I see a man lying face down on the street. Now, remember, I'm a nurse. My first thought was, great, I have to help this guy up. I was coming off a long shift and falls happen all the time. As I slowed down the car, I suddenly realized what an idiot move that was. I'm a 100-pound woman and I don't carry any weapons. I thought I should do something to help the guy, so I called 911 as I drove past him and slowed to a stop at the end of the block. While I was stopped at the light, I explained to the dispatcher that there was a man on the road who might need assistance. All of a sudden, I heard a loud bang from the driver's side window. I screamed and looked over. A man was pounding on my window and jiggling the handle of my locked car. looked in the rearview mirror and saw that there was no man lying in the street. Still on the phone with 911, I screamed, "I'm so scared," to the dispatcher and floored it through the red light. I quickly told him what happened, and even though I was right by my house, he told me to keep driving. After a few minutes, I had calmed down and he told me to loop back around. I pulled over down the road from my house and stayed in the car. I didn't see the man anywhere, so I got off the phone with the dispatcher, who told me he was sending a police car to cruise the area. As I gather up my things, I do a final scan of the area, and I see the man. He is walking with 2 other men. I hunched way down to my car until they were far down the road, then bolted into my house. I don't know if he had ill intent, but it freaks me the hell out that he wasn't alone. Always lock your car doors and carry mace. It finally started raining here, so I took my son, 14 male, out mushroom hunting over the weekend. It was later than we normally go, and the sun goes down much earlier, but we were taking a quick trail to the river and back in hopes of finding turkey trails or chanterelles. We took a wrong turn and ended up going through a big field, which the trail would take us back around to the main trail to the river. As we walked toward the main trail, the last group of people had left, and it was just me and my son. We walked along, and out of a thicket side trail came this weird man. He had a dog with him that was alert at his side. He was staring at us as we walked closer towards him. Then he started waving. This really weird slow wave. I was immediately uncomfortable and goosebumpy, but didn't want to be impolite, so I half-heartedly waved back while staring back and telling my son to slow up a little. I didn't want to actually meet up at the junction. After a full minute of us dawdling, the guy slowly turned and began walking down the trail toward the main trail. I was thinking it's possible this dude could be waiting around the corner. And sure enough, he was standing at the junction, off to the left and toward the parking lot, and to the right was a 0.6-mile trail to the river. The dude was just standing there, with his dog staring at us, not moving at all. Both my son and I were like, "Oh shit, let's keep wide to the right," and saying he looks old, and that we could run faster than him, and just generally planning for what to do. He kept staring at us, so as we approached, I asked if he was okay, and he kept staring back. He was greasy-haired, had tiny round glasses, wore a blue windbreaker and long plaid shorts, and was about 50 years old. His dog was a small beagle mix. He didn't answer me at all, just kept staring. We turned to the right and walked about a block. I had my phone camera facing me so I could watch him over my shoulder. The only movement was him slowly shifting his direction to continue staring at us. I didn't say anything else to him. It was moderately unsettling. His stare made more so by his lack of response, a motionless face, weird tiny glasses, and slow wave at us like a zombie. He did leave because on our way back he was no longer standing on the main trail. I was 13 years old at the time, now 22, and on vacation with my parents in Turkey. We were in an all-inclusive hotel and enjoying the holiday. The hotel is full of tourists from different countries. There was this one guy around 20 who was staring at me for some time. I felt uncomfortable and asked him how he was doing. Wrong choice. The next few days, everywhere I was, he also suddenly appeared. Not flirting, just lurking for hours and watching me. He had a really strange vibe around him, and I felt I shouldn't be alone with him. Now, I was still young, so my parents didn't want to leave me alone in a foreign country, so he could not bother me. But one night, there was entertainment in the hotel, which became boring to me after some time. I told my parents I wanted to go to my own hotel room, and I would see them in the morning. I left and walked to the elevator. What I didn't know was that the guy who was watching me for days saw me leaving, and he had followed me. When I saw him also coming in, I was in great fear. He looked at me silently with a sinister smile. This is it, I thought. And just before the doors of the elevator were closing, someone stuck his boot between them in order to prevent the doors from closing. I'm not kidding. All I could see was a boot. The doors opened, and it was my dad. He saw that the creepy guy was leaving at the exact same time I had left and didn't trust it. He looked the guy in the eye and said hello. My dad took me to my hotel room. To this day, I'm so glad for the rescue because I don't want to know what would have happened if he didn't. The story takes place when I was 17. In a small border town that I grew up in, I lived in a house on a steep hill, and I took the bus every morning and after school to come home. Classes started very early, and no other students lived on my small street. It must have been during the winter because it was very cold every morning, which isn't a usual thing where I lived. I remember being afraid every morning because it was very dark outside, and I only had the light of the moon to guide me. And back then, cell phones didn't have flashlights that you could use to guide your way in the dark. There were only 3 other houses on my small street, and they were all on a big hill with paved driveways going down and meeting a gravelly road. The houses were arranged around a gravel cul-de-sac, which many people used to turn around if they went down the wrong road. I live in a desert area, so there were leafless mesquite trees and cacti around, to where it was very reminiscent of a forest or dense flora area. It was so quiet that all you could hear were the bats fluttering around the one street light, but usually it was just pitch black, along with the yapping of coyotes and crickets chirping. Other than that, all I could hear was the crunching of the gravel beneath my feet. The first time I saw the man in a van, I wasn't that surprised. A lot of the time, we would get these white vans passing through because they delivered the papers to the surrounding houses. I then started to realize that this van would stop right next to me when I was standing alone waiting for the bus to arrive. There was a stop sign there, but there was no reason for the person in the van to be stopped there for 10 minutes until the bus picked me up. He must have started to get brave after that because he would roll his window down and ask me if I was cold. I'd say yes and ignore his presence and pretend like nothing happened. I just figured he was trying to be nice to me. He was an older man in his 70s. Again, the next day he pulls up even closer to me. "Are you cold? You look beautiful today, but you look so cold." This time I just ignored him and waited for the bus to pull up, and I got in. I would watch his white van pull away after my bus left. He kept doing this for 2 weeks, until one day he looked at me through his window and said, "I could use a pretty girl like you. It's cold outside. You must be so cold. Come inside my van and I'll keep you warm until your bus gets here." Luckily, the bus pulled up a few seconds later, and I decided I needed to tell someone about him. My dad is in law enforcement, and I told my dad what had been happening. He asked me what he looked like and when the van would pull up. He said I should have told him sooner, but he's glad I told him when I did. He called the police, and I told him what had been happening. They said they had similar reports in the area and that they would catch him. The next day, the police hid behind me where the cul-de-sac is, and I stood in my usual spot where I stood for the bus. I remember that day, the street light was finally working, and I could see the man's face in the van. He didn't realize the officer was there until he made a full turn around the cul-de-sac and started towards me. The police turned their lights on and pulled him over. I could hear him yelling as the bus pulled in, and I left for school. I could see the police lights glaring on the bus windows. The next day, my dad sat me down and told me he had to talk to me. Apparently, the man had many suspicious things in the van. He had duct tape, plastic bags, zip ties, condoms, lube, black trash bags, a machete, and some other strange things. He claimed to be a newspaper man, and he would distribute the newspapers to my neighbors. Yet, the police never found one newspaper in his van when they searched it. My dad ran a background check on him, and he had a CD passed. I'm not sure whatever happened to the man legally, but he never showed his face on the street again. But whenever I stood there at the end of the street, all I could think about was if he had gotten the courage to step out of his van, I would have had no way to defend myself, and no one would have heard from me again.